be a great time to hit the trails. In general, you'll find smaller crowd sizes, and it can be really fun to see the landscape in its dormant state. Perhaps the biggest barrier to getting out in the winter months is combating the cold. Here I'm going to discuss with you your biggest defense against the cold. Employing a proper layering system for winter can make the difference in your experience and your safety. Purchasing technical apparel can be daunting. There are so many options in the market. What do you choose from? The rundown of what you'll want to be wearing is a base layer, a mid layer, shell layer, and jacket. I'm also going to discuss with you footwear and accessories. Before diving into the specific function of each of the layers, I wanted to discuss with you the system as a whole, as well as the fabrics you'll be selecting from. Hands down, the two biggest components for staying warm when it's cold out are insulating your body in order to retain its own warmth and staying dry. Being damp, even when it's not that cold out for a prolonged period of time, can drag down your core body temperature, resulting in hypothermic conditions. In order to avoid this, it's important to have a flexible layering system so you can layer up for additional warmth or layer down depending on your level of exertion and how the conditions may vary. As anyone who's weathered a summer storm in a rain jacket well knows, we're not just battling moisture from the outside, but also bodies in motion will produce perspiration. So we need to deal with the moisture coming from the inside as well. That's where fabric selection can help. Synthetic fibers are hydrophobic, aka wicking, and what that means is they will absorb the moisture from your body, disperse it throughout the fabric, which aids in faster evaporation. Basically, they're going to get dry faster. The saying cotton kills is due to the fact that cotton will absorb moisture, but then it takes a really long time to dry. The bottom line is, don't wear cotton while hiking in the winter, and that goes for your undergarments as well. Instead, you're going to be looking for fabrics that are made up of a combination of nylon, polyester, and spandex. If you prefer natural fibers, wool and merino wool can also work, but once those fibers become saturated, they also take longer to dry than synthetics, so they're a less optimal choice. Another note to consider is the fit of the garments. It's important to select clothing in the proper size, not just for comfort and maneuverability, but also to get the optimal performance out of your pieces. For example, choosing clothing items that are too large can do something that's called the bellows effect, where it introduces cold air from the environment into that warm air you're keeping close to your body, and it's going to drive down the temperature of the whole system, cooling you off. On the converse, if you're selecting items that are too tight, you're going to lose some of that loft or the puffiness of the insulation, and that's going to inhibit its ability to insulate you. In more extreme scenarios, clothing items that are too tight can constrict blood flow to that area of your body, inhibiting your body's ability to keep that area warm. Now let's talk about layers. The base layer is the layer you're going to wear closest to your body. While it can do some to insulate you, the primary purpose of your base layer is to disperse perspiration to keep your body dry, thus warm. One important thing to consider when choosing a base layer is that this is your innermost layer. So know yourself, know how warm you tend to get while you're exerting yourself, and look at the specific conditions for where you're going that day. If you take off all your other layers and just have your base layer on, are you going to still be too warm? Personally, there are two levels of base layers that I'll select from depending on the conditions and my estimated exertion for a trip. My lighter weight base layer has some selected areas of perforation, allowing some additional breathability, versus the tighter knit base layer that I'll wear if the conditions are going to be very cold. If your base layer is keeping you too warm and you're perspiring too much and that gets soaked through, putting on additional layers on top of that damp layer is only going to do so much to keep you warm. Keep this in mind when you're selecting your base layer. Mid layers is where we're going to see the greatest amount of product variability. Mid layers can consist of merino wool layers, polar tech fleeces, even down puffy jackets can be counted as mid layer depending on your conditions. The mid layers I usually select from are a hooded polar tech fleece, such as my Patagonia R1, which fits trimly over my base layer and nicely under my Mountain Hardwear Ghost Whisperer puffy jacket. Remember when you're choosing outerwear options for winter that you're going to have additional layers on, adding bulk to your frame under those layers. So keep that in mind when you're selecting your sizing. The mid-layer pant selection that's going to be most common is a double weave soft shell fabric. This fabric is lightweight, but wind and water resistant. If it's not enough to keep you warm, layering a synthetic base layer tight underneath can be effective. I personally prefer to wear a legging which is made of Polartec fabric and is water resistant and wind resistant. When I'm stopped for a prolonged period of time, if that's going to be not enough to keep me warm, I do have a pair of down puffy pants that I can put on over my tights. There are different degrees of shell layers that are designed for different levels of precipitation. On the lighter end of the spectrum is the wind layer. Wind layers will be effective against the wind, but only lightly effective against water. These do have their advantages in that they're very lightweight and super compressible. So if you're not going to have a lot of precipitation, this can be an effective option. On the other end of the spectrum are hard shell layers. And even within hard shell layers, there is some variability. For the average hiker, I'd say look for a 2 to 2.5 layer breathable, waterproof fabric, such as Gore-Tex or Pertex. These fabrics will be effective in keeping you dry for a prolonged period of time, but they're not some of the more expensive overkill options that alpinists may choose from. Even within that narrow category, you're going to have some jackets that have some stretch, some that are soft to the touch, which are very nice and add to the comfort. You might look for something that's helmet compatible or has a moldable visor. Also, having underarm zippers can be effective in helping to maintain some breathability underneath that watertight, non-breathable, breathable, waterproof fabric. Parallel to the shell jackets, shell pants also come in a variety of layers, but my recommendation would be to look for that double weave, breathable, waterproof fabric. A key feature to look for in your shell layer pants is going to be a zipper up the leg so that you can put them on and remove them without having to remove your boots or microspites or crampons. In truly cold temperatures, sometimes the combination of all the aforementioned items is still insufficient, especially when your exertion is very low. If you're going to be spending long days with a lot of exposure, even overnight trips in the winter, highly consider making the investment into a down parka or a belay jacket. It can be difficult to buy into this category because, especially if you're shopping online, it can be hard to tell how warm or how puffy something actually will be just from numbers on a screen. So my tip is to look for something that's described as a down parka, belay jacket, or something with alpine climbing in the description. You might also look for features such as them being helmet and harness compatible. These jackets can be a pretty big investment, but when it comes to your safety and being comfortable in the mountains, it might be worth it. Anyone that's familiar with my winter travels may well know that my headwear of choice is a beret. But regardless of your personal style, be it beret or beanie, putting on a hat can do as much for you in staying warm as putting on an additional sweater for a lot less bulk and weight. Make sure to bring a hat with you when you're headed out into the winter cold. I personally like to wear a beret because it fits snugly on my head and doesn't drop down in front of my eyes or in the back. Plus, I think it looks kind of fancy. For conditions with really cold weather, for additional head protection, having a balaclava with you can also be a wise choice. It can help protect your face from a lot of wind. If the wind is picking up particles of snow and slapping against your face, having a balaclava to protect you is a wise choice. Coming from someone that has twice had frostbite on my fingers, I would highly recommend bringing more than one pair of gloves with you. It is recommended to bring multiple pairs, including a lightweight pair. I would say bring a pair that is touchscreen compatible, so you don't have to remove your gloves in order to navigate or use your devices. And then a thicker layer that's maybe more waterproof, windproof, and is insulative. So be that a glove or a mitten, having 2 pairs with you because they are easily soaked and easily lost is smart. If your hands are always cold, then wearing mittens is going to keep your hands warmer than gloves. And you can even look for mittens that have a little zipper pocket where you can put a hand warmer inside, and that should keep you nice and toasty. Sunglasses can be easily forgotten in the winter months, but if you're going to be traveling on snow, they are a necessity. Polarized sunglasses have their advantages in that they'll protect your eyes against the UV rays that are bouncing up from the snow, not just those that are emanating from the sky. If you're going to be spending a lot of time in alpine environments, look for a VLT rating between 5 and 10% for maximum eye protection. I'm choosing to keep the topic of footwear in this video focused under the framework of staying warm. There is a lot more to talk about in terms of footwear, but that's kind of where I'm going to steer this conversation. Winter is a great time to move to a Gore-Tex boot with a higher cuff than maybe something you would wear during the summertime. Also, the same rules apply for your feet as they do for your body. So in order to help keep your feet warm, you want to insulate them, you want to keep them dry, but you also want to keep them free from any constriction. It might make sense to you that putting on 3 pairs of socks with your boots would help keep your feet warm in the wintertime. But if putting on those extra pairs of socks actually makes your boots a little bit too tight, it can work against you. Keep this in mind. Instead, try to look for a pair of socks that will help keep your feet warm. If you're using socks in the if you're using socks in the summertime that work to keep your feet cool, those are not socks that you want to be wearing in the winter. Instead, look for a nice warm pair of merino wool socks. Those merino wool socks will help keep your feet dry, but they're also going to keep you warm. If you struggle with keeping your feet warm, putting a foot warmer inside your boot can also help. Just keep in mind that you don't want those warmers to sit against your skin because prolonged exposure will cause burns. Something else that can help keep your feet dry is using gaiters. Gaiters will prevent snow from getting into the top cuff of your boot and causing your feet to become wet and cold. Gaiters can also help prevent damage to your legs or pants if you're wearing micro spikes or crampons. Speaking of traction devices, this is gearing more towards the technical side of things, and I would like to discuss this in greater length in another video, but I still want to mention it here because I see a lot of people that go out into the mountains in the wintertime and they do not have proper footwear or traction devices. This can be very dangerous. The number one cause of injury is actually falling. So if your boots are going to do nothing to grip onto that ice and you're not bringing traction devices, you're setting yourself up for injury. I would highly recommend making the investment into an actual spike versus the metal coil traction devices. Time and again, I've seen those be less than effective and actually just completely fail. There are some things that you just need to spend the money on in order to help ensure your safety. In this case, purchasing an adequate pair of micro spikes if you're going to be going into an environment that has seen any level of precipitation and has dipped at any point below freezing is imperative. It is not as important that you're wearing a name brand fleece jacket. As long as the one you have functions properly, that's fine. Instead, spend the money on the technical pieces that are going to help keep you safer. I hope you found that this video was helpful to you. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel for more content like this. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.